It's such a different feeling. Alive. I've watched a lot of your videos, but it's very different live. It's definitely a different energy. It's cool.
Oh, nice.
Okay, we have a cracker.
He's cute.
So I got into non-duality about like 6 weeks ago.
Wow, wow.
Started inquiry, which is really, really awesome. And I've done a lot of personal work in lots of other capacities before this, but non-duality is somewhat new to me. The thing I've noticed that's been going on for a really long time, and I'm just curious from what your perspective would be about it, is and this is like this is personal, and so I don't want to go into like the whole story because I don't even think the story is relevant necessarily, but I find that when my husband comes home at night, my energy changes, and this has been going on for a while, and I don't feel like I have control over it, but I don't. I observe it happen, and I want it to change because it's not good for the relationship, and I don't like watching myself be that way.
Yeah.
But I can't. I don't know why, but it's just perpetual thing.
Yeah.
And it's not even always because the inquiry really works with stopping thoughts for me, but sometimes it's not thoughts to stop. It's just like this energy that where I get kind of tough, like it's like a tougher version of myself.
Yeah.
And more irritated and sort of like, and I don't know. It wasn't always that way in our relationship, and I know it's not him. I know it's me and my conditioning, or so it's not like there's something that he's doing or whatever. But I don't know like what. Yeah. I just kind of want to throw that out and see.
Yeah.
What thoughts you might have.
Yeah, and so the freedom is the movement back to that still presence and that recognition of that presence that you are. That's the real freedom. But on the human level, what happens is when we begin to form the ego at like 2 or 3 years old, we begin to form these seeking patterns. So we have all these feelings and we begin to seek in time to find relief from those feelings. So this seeker forms, and we seek to do things or to get things in order to avoid what our current experience is. And so what I would advise, like when your husband comes home, is just acknowledging what feelings are in the body and see what it is that you want. Because the human always wants something, and that's not wrong, that's not bad. But when we're looking for love in our wants, this is when we really begin to become out of balance, and it really veils who we truly are. And what is it that you want from him? What is it that you want in those moments? And just try to be as honest with yourself as possible. And you can do that just by going into the feelings.
Yeah, I've been asking myself that. I think it might be one of those like, you're hiding it from yourself, because I've been asking myself like, is there a resentment, is there an expectation, like what?
Yeah.
But this is all like my mind's like trying to solve this thing. Like it's like, are you angry, are you resentful, does he not do, are you looking for him to say something, to do something, like what?
Yeah. And
there must be an answer, because I know I'm still a seeker.
Yeah.
Like there's times where that drops, but not all the time.
But the reason that your mind's going round and round about it is because it's hurting you, and you're looking for relief from that, and that's why your mind begins to obsess about something, anything. Like it can do it about work colleagues, it can do it about what someone says, but this is a particular issue at the moment. And so first of all, you have to work out what you want from him in those moments, and see what it is you feel like you're not getting. And do it by feelings.
that I don't want anything from him, but maybe that's not true.
No, it's not true. We always want something in every situation, enlightened or not enlightened. It's the way we are. It's the way we're programmed. Like, we move towards wants, and the wants are conditioned, and it's not a bad thing. And acknowledging them, and you don't need to call them wants. Maybe that's a bit too aggressive. It's just the way life writes in the movement of these bodies. Like, you want to go and have a sleep, or you want to speak, or you want to be quiet, or you want to sit on the sofa, or you want to go for a walk. It's the way it works. There's these impulses. Like, different spiritualities talk about it differently. Like in Course in Miracles, they call it spirit, hearing spirit. Like, there's these natural impulses. And then we form a seeker on top of that, and we look for home in these wants. And this is when the suffering begins, because home is your nature. Home is that which is experiencing the person. But over years and years of forming this pattern where society and where your loved ones have always told you that happiness is in your wants, happiness is in getting, this belief forms. So there's something in when he comes home where you're not getting what you want, and it's triggering that you're not being loved or something. Like, it's triggering that you're not, that he's stopping you being at home.
I think it's presence. It's like, I want more presence, but it's also like, because I've observed this too, like sometimes he's on his phone a lot, and that frustrates me, but then I realize it's only, it's a bit of a reflection of my own habits, because I'm probably on, I'm on my phone more than it's probably healthy. And so I've kind of tailored that off, and I've noticed that the more I tailor it off, then the less annoyed I am at what he does, because really it's more about me. So I guess maybe with the presence, it's the same.
That's what and recognizing that's what you want all the time. That's always what you want. This is key. Like, always, in every moment, what you want is home. And so in that situation, there's something that feels like it's dragging you out of home. Whether it's the way you behave with him, whether it's old patterns that you represent, whether it's you not getting something met. And just recognizing that, and don't see it as like, okay, I've got to do this straight away. Just see it as an investigation. Like, every time he comes home, you get to investigate something that's lying, something that's telling you that you aren't home, that you aren't initially free. And moving back to presence doesn't mean that the person doesn't have irritations and annoyance and conflicts. Like, that's part of being human, like having ups and downs. But it's seeing those for what they are, that they're pain and pleasures, and the presence is there regardless. Your home is there regardless. They're sensations, and they're about communication and being human. But at the moment, more than likely, you're associating something there that's taking away presence. And it's just investigating that. And the best way you can investigate these things is by putting your attention into your body and seeing what your body's saying. Like, seeing where it's hurting in your body. Like, if it's hurting in the heart, or if it's hurting in the solar plexus or in the gut. And these areas in the body tend to be related to certain things. Like, the heart area tends to be related to love. The voice, the throat is about not being able to speak or communicate, or anger. The gut tends to be around fear, or feeling disempowered or caged in the solar plexus. And these are the emotions that I describe are related to what people call chakra points, if you want to look it up. And I think that chakras are very accurate to our emotions. You won't find freedom in emotions. Freedom is the presence that's looking at the emotions, but often we're unaware of what we're feeling. So you can just, like, when he comes home, see what's getting activated in your body. If it's your throat, just write it down each evening when he comes home, which area is getting activated.
So if you're, I know it's not a prescription, but if you're around someone who's clearly like still lost in their head, or they're, thinking about like the news in like a way that you feel like it's not that relevant to like what's happening.
Yeah.
The answer is always to pay attention to what you're feeling in your body.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I don't have no's. It doesn't mean, like, you know how sometimes you get into these spiritual ideas that you've always got to be yes. It doesn't mean that I don't walk away from certain situations. Like, I don't enjoy watching the news particularly, so I don't engage in that much. Sometimes I like to look at the news, like, just to see what the world is saying they think is going on, but I don't really like to be in that mentality, so I tend to step away from it. So that doesn't mean that you don't have likes and preferences. Your body's going to have likes and preferences, and you're allowed to have likes and preferences, and you're allowed to have wants. It's just noticing that freedom won't come in that. That's the difference. Freedom is your presence, but you're allowed to say, I don't want to watch the news, and communicate that. But you've got to understand, in relationships, it tends to be about like compromise. So like maybe you step outside while he watches the news, but if that doesn't interest you anymore, if you're evolving past that, then that's totally allowed as well. So it's understanding those differences. You're allowed to have wants. You're totally allowed to address what you want, but you won't find freedom in that. Home is not in that. Home is the presence. So that's the difference. And you'll notice the difference. So when you believe home is in a want, your mind will obsess about it. Like when it's not, it will be an annoyance in the moment, and you'll address it in the moment. You'll address that, you'll bring it up, not blaming the other person, but you'll express how you feel, or you'll remove yourself from that situation. When the person is looking for home in a situation, it will keep getting obsessed with that situation mentally, and it'll keep repeating it. So that's the difference.
Trying to solve it like it's a puzzle, and
yeah.
Like I know that it's the answer's not
in that. No, the answer is in presence, and maybe in those moments you're not voicing your wants, or I'm not sure because I'm not in your relationship and you've not said enough about it. But there's not a voicing, or there's not an acknowledgement of what you want. It's really important, the acknowledgement of what we want. We don't always get what we want. Like, I'm not suggesting you'll always get it, but acknowledging it is important.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. It's tricky because we used to talk a lot about current events, and I have in the last probably year and a half drifted away from really wanting to invest any energy, really, other than just like a general awareness of maybe some major things that are happening in the world, but for the most part, I'm not interested anymore. And he's still very much like, oh, I read this, like, let me show you, like, handing me the phone, like, read this.
Yeah.
And I know I said, oh, that's not my cup of tea, like, no thanks, like, I don't care to know what's going on about that or whatever, but it's, eventually it's something will shift, I guess, because it's I think maybe there's also like a longing to connect in a way that's not related to those things.
And that's another thing that I was going to suggest looking at is we're taught that connection is through ideas, so through communication and through speaking, and actually connection is through presence. When you see that they are that presence too. Presence is this moment, like, so. But we're often taught, because that's the way we work as humans, we associate ourselves with people with similar ideas. So normally in our communities, we have similar ideas, similar beliefs. So that's how we're taught. And it feels nice to be with someone that has similar beliefs and similar likes and similar interests. But that's not connection. True connection is presence, and you're most probably beginning to realize that. So that shift is beginning to happen. It's the intimacy of experience. It's actually sitting on the sofa with someone. It's looking at them. It's the sound of their voice. It's not what they're saying. It's the air in the room. The breeze on the skin.
Yeah.
And often when we're going through this process, our relationships do begin to change, because before we were coming from an identified perspective, so it begins to shift. Like, you can't withhold very identified relationships or that old way of being anymore. So relationships do begin to change, which is always going to happen whenever you grow and whenever you open your mind to different possibilities.
Yeah, it's a exciting time, but it is like that unknown, because you are so used to sharing with people about ideas, and it's not so interesting to me anymore.
Yeah.
Almost any ideas, even non-duality, like the couple times I brought it up with people, it veered into a philosophical conversation, and I was not interested in that.
Yeah.
So it's like a discovery process, I guess, for me right now, about if you're not talking about ideas or like, policy changes or X or Y, like, where does that?
Yeah.
Of course, there's an answer, and it's different for every person. But like, I don't know yet where it is for me, I suppose.
You might also want to explore the idea of loneliness, because when you begin to shift from seeing connection is in presence to rather than ideas, there can be a sense of loneliness because the person still feels that connection is through ideas. So it begins to change things, and then there can be a sense or a feeling coming up of feeling alone or feeling removed from others. And just notice that for what it is. A feeling is arising, and that's not truth, that's not reality. What is reality is this very instant, is what's happening right now. But they sometimes play under the surface.
Yeah, I have to explore that. I'm very happy alone. I find I don't feel lonely when I'm alone, but
That's
I feel lonely when I'm with other people if they're not present, which is a lot of people in this world right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've explored being alone, and that's totally comfortable. I need to find some. I don't know. I don't want to even say need to find, because then it sounds like a seeking, but get to a place where. I don't know, maybe I'm feeling the loneliness around other people, and then I move past.
Yeah, totally. And really recognizing that when you are with other people. And whereabouts do you live? Because in most cities now, there's always non-dual groups. I know you've got a young child, but there are like online communities. But that's not the solution.
That it surely exists. I guess I get nervous about that because I don't want to be around people that are talking about it in a
heady way.
Philosophical way, because it's really not for me. It's not about
and that's not the answer.
Versus this or that,
Yeah, and that's not the answer. Like finding other people, it sometimes just can help so you can understand and reflect back the process that begins to happen on the human level. Because there's very typical things that happen, like this feeling suddenly where you don't any longer feel like you're connecting with people like you did before, because there's this shift happening, and so there is that sense of, and that can be really intense, feeling lonely when you're with people. Like to feel like you're an outsider, because part of our survival is based on being inside the group. So feeling like you're on the outside suddenly because you can't connect on these mental levels anymore. But in all of that, there's a recognition of the feeling. So there's an acknowledgement of the feeling, where you feel it, what you want, and then seeing that who you are as the experiencer of that all of that is appearing in the freedom. The presence is the most important part. But if you don't acknowledge these feelings, then there's an unconscious seeking that happens to try and get company, to try and find like-minded people, or get away from people that aren't like-minded. But nice, I think the seeing of all of that is really beautiful, like the openness to be able to see these things.
Yeah. I want to say that gives me something to go think about, but probably better to say that gives me something to go feel about.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, and you can watch it back. Sometimes it's hard to remember what's said.
Yeah. Well, the feeling is there. It's funny that it's so hard to find people to be so present, because it's not even about the words,
Yeah.
It's like even in a big city, it's just everyone. It's because in Los Angeles is a very ambitious city, so everyone's driving towards something. And
you're in LA?
Yeah, so there's a lot. I mean, it's a huge city. There's a lot out there. But it's definitely a city with people with drive,
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. It is.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Well, thanks for calling in. But I recommend, even though ultimately there isn't a doer, this isn't a prescription, but just afterwards, just to really feel that feeling that's coming up, and really
yeah,
acknowledge that feeling that's coming up.
yeah, yeah. It's funny how you have to like relax enough to feel your feelings. It's
We're always
it's a
taught.
weird thing. Like I feel a lot right now, but
Yeah.
there's other times where like it's just so like
Yeah.
they're there because I wouldn't be so
Yeah.
but it's always better. It always feels better to feel
Feel
them,
it. It does totally.
but not push them away.
But we're taught as a society to always think over feel. Always. Always. Even in psychology, even I think it's beneficial psychology, but it's always about thinking.
Yeah, yeah,
Always about a story about what we feel or how that feeling came about, rather than
yeah.
just
I mean, my mind always wants to be like, maybe because of this trauma is why you're doing this and this, and
yeah,
always trying to figure out some causality,
yeah,
and not that there's not some truth to that
yeah,
sometimes, but
yeah, and it can be really beneficial. It can to work out how something appears or to understand the personality structure. That can be beneficial. Yeah.
well, thanks for your time
Yeah.
and
Thanks.
taking the call.
Ah, lots of love to you. Thank you. Bye.